This video presentation has been classified by the ABC as M.
Love triangle glassing attack.
The online version makes it even clearer. The Northern Star in Lismore illustrated its front page yarn with a broken glass and tomato sauce. Very tasty, if not very tasteful. Welcome to Media Watch, I'm Jonathan Holmes. It's been a bad weekend for the US forces in Afghanistan. 8 Americans killed in a coordinated attack by the Taliban. America has been fighting in Afghanistan for 8 years now, for much of that time with Australian help. Tonight we're going to spend some time looking at what we have and haven't been allowed to know about Australia's contribution to the Afghan campaign.
Australian troops push their way through the greenery, hunting for the Taliban. They stay off the pathways because of the danger of improvised explosive devices.
That report was the result of an experiment in which the ABC, News Limited and the Australian Defence Force had all invested a lot of time and effort. The ABC's Sally Sara and reporter Ian McPhedran and photographer Gary Ramage of News Limited were embedded for 3 weeks with Australian units in Afghanistan. Before they left, there were high hopes. The Australian quoted McPhedran,
"This will give us the chance of going out at the village level, patrolling with our soldiers and talking to the local people. We will be up close and personal with the soldiers. I think that has been one of the big gaps in our coverage."
The ADF has told Media Watch that it's
Extremely pleased with the volume and general quality of reporting that the embedded journalists produced.
It's true that McPhedran and Sara filed numerous reports from the field, and News Limited has put up a website with video shot by Gary Ramage.
This is the Kyla where the Australian troops have found a cache of weapons. They found bomb-making equipment, and we're just waiting at the door hoping that we can get permission to go in and have a look at what they found.
But on his return, Ian McPhedran revealed that for the journalists, the trial had been frustrating. Early on, they travelled for 10 hours from the Australian headquarters to a far-flung military outpost.
After getting to know the soldiers and being briefed into their patrol plan for the next day, the officer in command was told by headquarters back in Tarin Kowt that we were not to leave the base.
In the end, the reporters accompanied troops on only 3 patrols outside the wire. In a report on the trial to the Australian Defence Force, which he's passed on to us, Ian McPhedran wrote,
"It is interesting to note that during a 1-month embed with US forces, Gary Ramage went on 16 full-blown combat patrols without a PR escort."
The embedding trial was an attempt to close the yawning gap between the ADF's idea of media access and the practice of most of our principal allies in Afghanistan, the Dutch, the Canadians, the British, and especially the Americans. Journalists embedded with US forces are given remarkable access. US Central Command's Public Affairs Guidelines state bluntly,
Commanders will ensure the media are provided with every opportunity to observe actual combat operations. The personal safety of correspondents is not a reason to exclude them from combat areas.
But concern for their safety was exactly why Sara and McPhedran were allowed to go on so few patrols, or so they were told. McPhedran wrote in his report,
"Denying access because something might be dangerous defeats the purpose of the exercise."
There's no doubt that true embedding carries risks, and not just to the safety of journalists. The infamous and shocking footage we're about to show you was shot by Australian freelancer Stephen DuPont 4 years ago while he was embedded with the US Army. It was first shown in a report on SBS's Dateline.
US soldiers have set fire to the bodies of the 2 Taliban killed the night before. The burning of the corpses and the fact that they've been laid out facing Mecca is a deliberate desecration of Muslim beliefs.
Yeah. Wow, look at that blood coming out the mouth on that one. Fucking straight death level.
Those images scandalised the Muslim world. Yet, as DuPont told George Negus, there had been no attempt to prevent him filming or filing the pictures.
I think once you're embedded with them, you can pretty well see whatever they're doing.
By contrast, until this year, the Australian Defence Force only permitted what the media derisively calls bus trips. A few days on the ground, most of them spent on heavily fortified bases, escorted at all times by an officer from Defence Public Affairs. Until recently, almost all Australian combat operations have involved the Special Forces, who are completely off-limits to the media. So the ADF's bus trips focused on the work of the Reconstruction Task Force, which has been constructing schools and hospitals near its base at Tarin Kowt.
Australian plumbers and carpenters and engineers in uniform will put down their weapons and pick up their tools.
But writing about the good works of the Reconstruction Task Force has long since palled for the Australian media. As Ian McPhedran wrote in his report,
having military personnel trying to sell stories about schools or bridges or hospitals when the real story is out with the infantry patrols generates major frustrations.
For the last year, there have been a lot more infantry patrols to cover. Australian infantry now mentor Afghan army units, going out into the villages and occasionally, as this graphic footage from the ABC's Tom Cooks showed in June, finding themselves in real combat.
And soon enough, we're ambushed again. This time, several RPGs land close to our position.
They're all on way close. Stay there! I'm moving to you, mate! Stay there, I'll move to you!
This is possibly the only footage of Australian soldiers in combat shot by a civilian journalist in 8 years of war in Afghanistan. And significantly, Cooks' trip was not arranged by Defence Public Affairs in Canberra.
Got back to school, I'm doing a head count now.
Cooks went to Afghanistan at the ABC's expense and once there was given an informal embed with the infantry at Tarin Kowt. Cooks told Media Watch,
"The commander on the ground arranged for me to go on a 6-day patrol. I'm sure if Defence Public Affairs had known about that in advance, they'd never have approved it."
When Ian McPhedran and Sally Sara finally did get their trial embed, caution was imposed from the top. Monash University's Kevin Foster, who's been studying the ADF's media relations policy, reckons that concern for the safety of journalists isn't the only reason.
The war is being reported in this way because the ADF want to exercise absolute control over every aspect of the news production process.
In its pursuit of what he calls a seamless PR message, Professor Foster says the ADF's Public Affairs Division
disdain the public's right to reliable, objective information. They also miss out on countless opportunities for the presentation of a positive portrayal of the troops doing their jobs.
Unlike the US Defence Department, the ADF often asks to view stories before they're filed. Ostensibly, that's to safeguard operational security. But a couple of days into Sara and McPhedran's embed, this happened.
And Australian troops have shot dead an Afghan police officer and wounded another in Afghanistan.
The injured police officer was evacuated by military helicopter suffering from serious injuries. He was shot at an Australian checkpoint at Durafshan, north of Tarin Kowt.
That story, certainly not one that helped the ADF's seamless PR message, made it to air, but according to Ian McPhedran's report, its filing was delayed for some hours because
a PR bureaucrat in Canberra decided that nothing should move until the minister has spoken in Parliament. It was only the goodwill of the individuals involved that prevented a conflict at that point.
In its usual ponderous prose, the ADF has told Media Watch that
the trial aimed to develop and evaluate a media embedding model that provided increased media access while managing the risks of allowing civilian journalists to work with the ADF in high-threat operational environments.
But the fact is, good war reporting is risky. There's the risk of journalists getting wounded or killed, and the risk that they'll see bad things happening. What we're getting now in Australia is not just managed risks, but managed news. 2 weeks ago, we looked at some of the ways the commercial TV networks can run ads and promos that somehow don't count as ads and promos. Well, here's another that lasted for the best part of 8 hours. It started a couple of minutes into Seven's border security last Sunday night.
What our concerns are, you've got all this trouble going to Vietnam. Obviously costs a fair bit.
See that? It stayed there for the rest of the show. And it was there right through the show that followed, The Force.
Officers from Bass Hills Regional Enforcement Squad.
And from the opening credits of Casino Royale till the end of the movie. And after that, right through Las Vegas. though after midnight the message changed to
he buys high-tech company in San Jose.
So far as we're aware, it's a new development on Australian TV, and a number of Seven's viewers told us they didn't like it one bit.
I regard this as unnecessary and, quite frankly, bloody annoying.
Keith Hughes complained to Seven.
This was another blatant, flagrant breach of the allotted advertisement time allowed. I will be reporting this to the relevant authority, as I was disgusted by your lack of ethics.
Well, Keith, good luck. But I'm sure Seven will claim that it hasn't breached the rules. The commercial TV industry codes of practice say that
superimposed text or visual matter occupying only part of the screen during a program
is exempt from the time limits that apply to ads and promos. So Seven might argue that it can watermark promos all day and all night if it wants. But the code also says that it intends to ensure that
there are firm limits on the amount of commercial and promotional matter scheduled in any 1 hour.
Seems to me if Seven's allowed to get away with this, the limits aren't firm, but exceedingly limp. That's something, Keith, that you could put to the relevant authority, the Australian Media and Communications Authority. And then there was this on Nine's Wide World of Sports.
Well, Shane, let's start from the top. Your hair. Good hair day or bad hair day?
Good hair day today. You know, when I first came to Advanced Hair Studio a few years ago, I wanted to do something about it. And now, with the DNA testing, young people can come in early and it's 95% accurate that people can come in and find out if they're going to go bald or not.
All right, let's talk about the Ashes.
Australia's greatest ever spin bowler back home in Melbourne, the Ashes lost, the Champions Trophy coming up, and Wide World of Sports lead off with a question about Warnie's hair? At least 10's 1HD left the question till last.
And just quickly, time to pay the bills. What's today all about? What's going on there?
Yeah, it's pretty exciting for Advanced Hair. Advanced Hair Studio have come up with a DNA test that's 95% accurate. People can come in and get a test done and they'll tell you if you're going to go bald.
I might get it done. Thanks, Shane.
Thanks, mate.
Advanced Hair Studio is one of Warnie's sponsors. The interviews took place at the launch of their new product, and the ubiquitous Max Markson was there to put the pressure on. As he told Media Watch,
I'd be a really lousy PR person if I didn't make sure my client got a mention.
And hey, it may be a blatant plug, but it doesn't count as an ad. So why not keep Warnie happy? That's it for this week. For Ian McPhedran's full report on embedding in Afghanistan and more, visit our website. Until next week, good night.